Let me just flip it over to you real quick and just do a real quick introduction to our topic today.
All right, great. Well, guys, if you want to become a superstar, I want to talk to you a little bit about this. So, you know, there are bad salespeople, there's mediocre salespeople, there's consistent salespeople, and then there are the superstars. The superstars, they're the guys that win all the contests, they go on all the trips, and they're consistently on the leaderboard. And, they're good at selling, they've got a lot of talent, and they got skills. They're competitive, they know how to manage their sales process, they ask great questions, they deliver winning presentations, and they close the deal. But you know what? Here's the real truth of it. So do lots of salespeople. In fact, most of us possess the drive and the hunger to succeed. Most of us have sales knowledge. Most of us do great presentations. Most of us are prepared for rebuttals and we're ready for objections. Most of us know how to assume the sell. Most of us are competitive and most of us have goals. Yet, most of the time, consistent people, or rather, I'm sorry, most of us consistently underperform the superstars. And that's what I want to talk about today. Uh, you know, so many people are frustrated because they can't figure out what's missing. And what separates the superstars from the rest of the pack, it's not really a big secret, but this is the secret. It's superstars sustain real sales success because they're relentless, they're unstoppable prospectors, and they keep their sales funnel full of qualified prospects, and they're ready to prospect anywhere in any time. It's all about prospecting. So you know what? We spend a lot of time on the sales skills. We spend a lot of time on presentations. We spend a lot of time on how to, overcome certain objections. But really, the truth of the matter is, if you want to be great in sales, you got to be a prospector. And that's what I want to talk to you today about. Now, let me tell you some of the excuses that we get, for not prospecting. Oh, it's not a good time to make calls. Uh, People complain, nobody's calling me back. Uh, People whine, the leads are bad. People say, I have a fear. Oh, there we go. I have a fear of no. I don't want to I don't want to prospect because I don't want to hear them say no. Superstars, they don't procrastinate. Superstars, they make time to get it done now. When the prospect, I guess when times are good, they prospect. When times are bad, they prospect. And when they don't feel good, they prospect anyway. So if you want to be a superstar, you got to be ready to prospect all the time. Be always carrying your business cards. Let me see here. Joe has some stuff on the board. They're too busy. These are the excuses. They're not ready yet. I like that you put there up there perfectionist, Joe, because I have that down too. Let me see. It's not the right time to door knock. It's not the right time to call. These are all the excuses that we get.
These are things that, yeah, these are things. Let me cut in just for a second. These are, yeah, I stole off of your sheet and I just added a few things. These are some of the things that I get from, some of the things that I've heard from agents, and we'll cover these either now or a little bit later. But the too busy meaning is like, oh, they got too much stuff going on. They think they're too busy. Um, I got to learn my products first before I prospect. And then the not ready is what Jimmy was, the perfectionist, like, oh, it has to be perfect before I make a dial. And then I'll just go through each one real quick, and then we can dive in. But the not a good time meaning is like, oh, I didn't get a chance to call this morning. Now it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's not a good time to call, or it's not a good time to door knock, and then not enough time. Oh man, I missed my window this morning. I didn't have an opportunity to block out 3 or 4 hours, so it's not, I only have an hour, or I only got 30 minutes. It's not worth it to make any dials. And then I've heard agents say, well, I don't have enough leads to prospect. I'm like, well, dude, it only takes one lead. I mean, you got to, you got to start somewhere. You don't need 100 leads to start prospecting. You only need one lead to start prospecting. And then I've heard agents tell me they can't make calls from home because they don't have a quiet place to make calls. It's too noisy. These are just, and there's a billion excuses that Jimmy and I have heard of why agents are not why they're not prospecting. But I think one of the things we're going to dive into this call is the kind of the not only the excuses, but what's actually behind the excuse. Why are we procrastinating? What's the real the cause and effect, if you will. So Jimmy, I'll flip it back over to you.
Great, great. Well, you know what? I want to talk about the number one reason for failure in sales, and that is simply an empty sales funnel. And what's the root cause of an empty sales funnel? It's failure to prospect. And so if you're in a sales slump, or your sales are not where they want to be right now, you got to start prospecting. And Joe put the slide up there. You see the funnel on the widest part. That's where everything starts. That's where you put your leads in there. Now, let me just clarify something for you. We have leads that we purchase, and that's the easiest way to keep your sales funnel full. This is not a call about leads, but I do want to say you're not limited to just leads that you purchase. I mean, when you're sitting down with a client and you get a referral, that's a lead that goes on the top of your sales funnel. When you're buying coffee at McDonald's or Starbucks, and you start up a conversation and you whip out your business card, and if they have interest and you exchange numbers, that's a lead, right? So all your leads go on the top. That's where it starts. You got to have the lead, and then you got to work that lead. You got to prospect them. You got to make the calls, right? And that's what we're talking about. And from that, you're going to get appointments. And then obviously, when you get appointments, you're going to make presentations, you're going to take applications, and that's going to convert to sales. But it starts at the top. And Joe says there's plenty of times, the wider that funnel is, the more full it is of leads and people to call, the more sales you're going to pass through that funnel. So,
hey, Jimmy, can I add something real quick?
Yes, sir.
In talking to agents ask me all the time, well, here's some of the most common questions I get from new agents. Hey, Joe, what does the average salesperson make? Okay. The second most common question I get is, well, why do agents fail? And in my opinion, what I think is that maybe the number one reason why agents fail is that they drastically underestimate the amount of prospecting it takes to make sales. And I tell agents this all the time. I said, listen, man, these are, the leads that we produce, these are high quality leads, but they're not going to sell themselves. And they're like, well, what do you mean by that? I'm like, most agents drastically underestimate the amount of prospecting that it takes to be a successful agent. They think calling a lead once, door knocking it once means it's resolved. It's not a resolved lead. You have to have, and we've talked about this on other calls. The secret sauce to prospecting is not only effective prospecting, but it's massive prospecting. It's having massive activity every single day. You have to have, we talk about all the time, the secrets to success is having, with your, oh man, I just lost my train of thought. But with the sales process is having the massive amount of activity with the prospecting. I may think of what I'm going to talk about real quick, but let me just cover something real quick, Jimmy. Okay, let me
Sure.
find because we on so many sales calls that we've talked about, here's a perfect example. We've talked about the sales cycle. Well, look, in almost everything that we talk about lead creation, and we talk about prospecting, prospecting. Here, prospecting isn't in here, but we added it. That's the meat. That's the secret sauce in between. The connection between leads and appointments is prospecting, because leads don't prospect themselves. You have to be a massive prospector. We've done I went through, as I was studying for this webinar today, Jimmy, I went through some old webinars that we've done in the past that are, I don't think that are recorded, but we did one that the 5 reasons why you're not selling more. I don't know if you remember this or not, but I'm pulling stuff out of the past. Look, number 1 is you don't have people to talk to. Number 2 was you're not prospecting effectively. And then we did another webinar once called Why Agents Fail. Number 1 was lack of leads. Number 2 was lack of prospecting. It was number 2 again. So it just goes to show how critical and how important prospecting is. Sorry, I didn't mean to show that screen. So it really is the if you will, prospecting is really the next to leads. Prospecting is the secret sauce to being successful. I'll turn it back over to you, Jimmy.
Thank you, Joe. And I want to talk about the 3 reasons why. These are the most common reason why people don't prospect. And the first one is real simple. It's the fear of rejection. You know, we're scared to hear that no. And you know what it is? The second reason is we don't want to interrupt someone's day. See, because if you're calling on the phone, they're not expecting the call, right? So you're interrupting their day. And we don't want that negative response from the person, right? So it's kind of like a social thing that's built into us, right? That we're social people. If we're door knocking, you know, they're not expecting us to stop by, so we're interrupting their day. That's what we're scared of. We're scared of that rejection because we interrupted somebody's day. The other reason is really simple also. It's because it's not fun. You know, the fun stuff is like making illustrations, preparing quotes. Fun stuff is doing the actual presentation and engaging and interacting with the prospect. The fun stuff is writing an application, right? The stuff that's not fun is getting all that rejection and all the no's. And this is what I have to tell you, is that you just have to get over it. And people that prospect effectively and that are really strong in sales, it's not because they're so bold and they're so brave, you know, it's because they got over themselves. You just have to get over it and just get out there and do it. Okay. And so I want to go back to the excuses for a second. I want to touch on a couple of them. Okay. So these are common things that happen to people that prevent them from actually, you know, making prospecting calls, whether it be over the phone or be in person. And the first one is, you know, they say they're too busy. They don't have enough time because they're doing busy work. You know, they're doing paperwork. They're working on pending cases. Maybe they're working on illustration or proposal. Maybe because, quote unquote, they're social selling, right? They're using LinkedIn or Twitter, or, you know, they're trying to social sell. Well, first thing I have to tell you about that is good luck, because you ain't going to make any kind of immediate sale off of that stuff. that takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, and a lot of time. And that's something that not only do you have to plant the seed and water it over a long period of time, but it has a very, I guess you can say, slow result. You're not going to get any kind of immediate sales. So I'm not saying not to do that stuff, but I'm just saying that's not where you want to spend most of your time. If you do want to spend time on social selling, you want to do that in non-productive hours. You want to do that either early morning or late night. You don't want to mess with your selling time on social selling. Okay. Another thing is Joe says, perfectionist, right? Uh, I looked this up, and you know what? A perfectionist, the real thing about a perfectionist, why they're a perfectionist is because they don't want to fail. It's a fear of failure. So they want everything perfect before they do anything, right? They don't want to fail. Well, let me tell you something. The problem when it comes to prospecting is that fear of failure tends to lead to extensive procrastination. So you're trying to get everything just right. You're trying to find the perfect script. You're trying to be prepared for every objection you can get. You're trying to have everything lined up, all your ducks in a row, and you never get started. Well, let me just say this. It's kind of like going back to, if you kind of remember, I think most people remember learning how to swim, right? Like I'll just tell you my experience. My dad, he put me in a swimming lessons at the local pool in our neighborhood, right? And they taught me how to strokes. They taught me how to float on my back. They taught me how to do all these little steps, right? And then after learning that for a week, right? Like every day going to swimming lessons, we were taught all these little things to do. And then at the end of the week on Friday, they walked us up on top of the diving board on the deep end of the pool. And they said, okay, jump into the pool and swim to the shallow end. I don't know if this sounds familiar to you, Joe, right? But looking down on that water was scared. And I was thinking of all the reasons not to jump into that pool. But I got to tell you, it wasn't until the coach comes walking on the end of the diving board and staring down at me, I figured, well, they're either going to throw me in or I might as well just jump in and do it on my own, right? So I jumped in, and it wasn't until I jumped into the pool and I was in the water that all the things that I'd learned and knew that I needed to do started coming back to me. I started moving my arms, started kicking my feet. I was holding my breath, right? And before you knew it, guess what? I was at the end of the shallow side of the pool, right? And then once you do it one time, guess what happens? You want to do it again, right? And that's what kids do. They jump in, they swim, they keep doing it over and over and over and over. And that's what procrastinating on prospecting is like. It's like you're trying to get everything perfect. But guys, you just got to jump in. You just got to do it. Um, so I thought I'd say that. Now I want to read to you a quote by Dale Carnegie, and I don't know if you have that slide, Joe, but Dale says, "Inaction breeds doubt and fear. Action breeds confidence and courage. And if you want to conquer fear, don't sit at home and think about it. Go out and get busy." I love that quote. You got to just get out there and do it. That's what we're talking about.
Hey,
So
Jimmy, can I add something real quick?
go for it, Joe.
There's only one cure for fear, and that's activity. That's the only way that you can get over something that mentally that you're afraid of is just to do it. Because the longer you think about it, the more it's going to fester in your brain, and the more it's going to create pain. Here's the one thing. Can I just talk? Can I? I've been while you were talking, man. My mind is going like 1,000 miles an hour, and I'm just thinking of so much stuff that I just got to spit out real quick, okay?
Go
And then
for it.
I'll turn it over to you. Here's the thing that you may or may not know, but when you were born, when you're just a little baby, humans, and this goes way back to our animal side, our primitive side, if you will. In the primitive side of our brains, humans are only born with the fear of two things. It's the fear of loud noises, and it's the fear of falling. Every other fear that we have has been created through some type of interaction or social activity or something that we've learned. It's a learned fear. Why are you afraid to pick up the phone? Because probably when you were a kid, maybe someone told you children are meant to be seen, not heard, or stay out of their business. We're taught those things. Hey, you shouldn't interrupt. And we're born hearing those things as little children. So later as adults, when it's time to go to work and prospect, and we pick up the phone, somewhere in the back of our heads, we're hearing our parents or some adult or a teacher say, "Hey, it's not good to bother people. It's not good to interrupt. You got to learn to you got to go back and get back to the primitive side of your brain and know that you're really not afraid of that." But a lot of people do have kind of what I say is like a low mental tolerance for perceived pain. And remember, it's not pain. And real quick, I'll touch on this real quick. Is that, Jim, you talked about the reason why agents don't prospect is because the fear of rejection. Okay, but no one's rejecting you. No one's I promise you, it's not a rejection. We have to get over the fear. We have to understand that it's a numbers game, and that fear is nothing more than a perceived pain that we've created in our head. It really doesn't even exist. We've created it in our own, mental mess that we've got upstairs. And the reason why people procrastinate, procrastination is nothing more than the perceived pain of an associated activity. And the weird thing is that we procrastinate on things that haven't even happened yet. Like we procrastinate from making a phone call because we're perceiving the pain of someone telling us no or hanging up or whatever. It's crazy the things that we put into our own brain. That's why people don't go to the doctor sometimes. I know when you turn 50, you're supposed to go to your doctor and get a colonoscopy every year. But think of how many people don't do that. Why? Because of the perceived pain of what's going to happen, or the perceived thing is like, oh man, if I get a colonoscopy, they might tell me I have cancer, so I'm not going to go. How retarded is that? That's stupid, right? If you think about it. So the same thing with prospecting is that we've got to get over that perceived. Remember, it only exists in our brain. It's just perceived fear. It really does not exist. And real quick, Jimmy, I'm gonna that's all I have to say on that. But I want to turn it back over to you. But real quick, I'm just gonna make a real quick recommendation. Let me just find it. Guys, a good friend of mine and a mentor of mine, Jeffrey Combs, wrote a book called The Procrastination Cure. And I'm just telling you this, is that if you're suffering from procrastination, regardless of what it is, whether it's prospecting, it's working out, it's, that's another reason. Why don't people go to the gym more? Because it's the perceived pain it's the perceived pain of the activity. The reason why we don't do it. Oh, I got to get up early. I'm going to be sore the next day. Screw it. I'm just not going to do it. This book will help you dive in to the reasons why you do the things that you do. And if you research this subject, here's what I'm going to tell you. There is very, very little material anywhere that talks about procrastination. So this is a great book, and it's only, I don't know, a couple hundred pages or whatever. It's a book that you can read a couple of times, and you can get through it really, really quick. So, all right, Jimmy, sorry, man, I kind of went off on a tangent there. So let me
It's okay.
I kind of forgot where you were, man, but let me throw it back over to you. I was on a
Okay.
little mini
Well,
roll there.
I want to talk about a few more things, and then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some really good tips on how to effectively prospect. So just know that that's coming. Okay. So I want to talk about the 30-day rule, and basically what the 30-day rule is. The prospects, the prospecting that you do now in this current 30 days, that's going to pay off in the next 90 days. Okay. So consequently, if you're in a sales slump right now, that's a direct result of a lack of prospecting in the previous 30 days. Think about that. And let me just talk about this for just a second. On sales slumps, usually what happens is we start rehashing, regurgitating the same old leads. We don't get through to the people. We're not effective at setting the appointments or making the presentation or closing the deal. We start questioning our own ability, and we stop having fun. And really and truly, it's not because we're doing anything wrong on the sell side. It's really because we failed to prospect 30 days ago. Okay. And so once you realize that, you realize two things. One, you need fresh prospects, you need new leads. And secondly, you need to get to work, right? So I want to talk about the law of replacement just real quick, because sometimes people go through these sales cycles, right? They're like a roller coaster ride, man. They're killing it. Then they go down. Maybe they're not making so much sales. Now they're struggling, and then boom, they're going back up the roller coaster, killing it, and they're going through that roller coaster ride. Well, the reason why their sales are inconsistent is because they're not paying attention to the law of replacement when it comes to prospecting. Now, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say, for example, you close one out of every 10 prospects, right? So you're closing 10% of your prospects. If that's your number, right? And you have 30 prospects in your sales funnel and you make one sale, how many prospects do you have left? Well, most salespeople are going to say they have 29. But no, if it takes 10 to make one sell and you made a sell, you have 20 prospects left. That means you need to refill your funnel with 10 new prospects, right? That's why it's so key with our platform with the 20 leads a week system. You need to have consistent 20 fresh leads every week because you need to have more fresh people to talk to. The reality is you're not going to get a hold of all 20 in 1 week. So the next week, you need to start a new fresh batch and then continue to try to reach those people from the previous weeks. But you always need a fresh batch of leads or prospects. So you want to make sure that you're refilling your funnel. Now, I want to talk about effective prospecting, and I want to talk about a way to be really, really successful. And so to be effective with prospecting, you want to block out times that you're going to make your calls or make your door knocks, right? So we call these time blocks. And it's really important. We've talked about scheduling in the past, but we haven't really focused in on time blocks. And I call them power hours, or I call them dialing for dollars when I'm on the phone. But you want to set up designated times in your day where you're gonna prospect, right? And so, for example, let's talk about phone prospecting for a second, because you know, to me, you can cover more ground on the phone. You can spend all day driving around trying to meet with 20 people, or you can try to call 20 people in an hour, right? So I'm not saying not to door knock, but I'm saying you should do both. But specifically, let's talk about call blocks, right? Normally what happens, we already talked about the excuses. Once people do start making calls, they allow themselves to get distracted with certain things, right? So I want to talk about some best practices here. So the first thing you want to do is you want to turn off your computer, right? Make sure the computer screen is off. Okay. The biggest distraction of the whole day, by the way, is checking your email. So this has happened to me in the past. Let's say I'm well intended. I'm going to start my day off on the phones. I'm going to prospect. And I get up and I make my coffee and I get ready and I get in front of the computer and I'm going to get my leads ready and I'm going to make calls. And then I see my emails. Maybe I have 9, 10 emails. And I start checking my emails real quick, but then I got to respond. And then this and that happens. One thing you know, it leads me down a different path. And before you know it, it's 12 o'clock. It's time to go to lunch, and I hadn't even made a dial. So I just want to warn you that emails is the biggest time waster out there. Okay. Now I know what you're thinking. You're probably saying, "Hey, well, there's some important emails that come in. They might be important, but I guarantee you they're not urgent." Okay, because if something urgent came up, there's going to be a phone call or text message to say that it's urgent. Okay, so just to let you know, you want to put those emails off. You don't want to break the habit of the first thing you do in the day is checking your email. You want to start your day off calling. So do that, right? Uh, you want to make sure that you don't take any other calls. So if this is your power hour to make calls, and Jimmy Hernandez is calling you or Joe Johnson is calling you, you don't take the call. Well, call us back. Don't interrupt your schedule, right? Don't take calls from the wifey or your husband. Don't take no calls. On its power hour, it's time to call, right? Uh, you might even, this is a suggestion, if you're at home, put up a do not disturb sign on your door. Okay. And that tells everybody in the family that you're making your calls and you're not to be disturbed. Right. Um, I can tell you this. Joe said this earlier. It's too loud at home. That's my house. I have a very loud family. My kids, my wife, everybody talks loud. They yell. It's just like crazy. It's so loud in there. Joe told me this like a few years ago. Jimmy, just go make the calls in your car. And sure enough, that's what I do. I take my leads. I get in my car. I sit outside in the driveway and I make calls. And that's how. If that's what you have to do, that's what you got to do, right? Or now I can go to the office and make calls. I've got to get away, but whatever you got to do, you want to remove all distractions, right? The next thing you want to do is you just want to start dialing. Guys, we talked about jumping in the pool. That's really what you got to do. Um, I want to talk about protecting your golden sales hours, right? From 9 to 5, that's golden. That's your time to sell. That's your time to prospect, right? And just in general, you don't want to get caught up doing all these other things during prime selling time, right? I'm gonna just mention some of the distractions that we get. The first one is from our spouses. You know, they know that we don't work a job, so they try to give us a honeydew list. Can you do this? Pick up this, pick up the kids, go do this, go do that. My wife has already been reprogrammed. When it's during the day, I don't do no honeydew list for her. I am focused on business. The honeydew list that happens later. That's either early in the morning or later in the evening. But during the day, I'm going to take care of business. So that's the number one distraction. We talked about emails, uh, working on pending cases and illustrations. That's another distraction. Sometimes it's so fun to do that we let ourselves get distracted with that. Um, Another thing I want to talk about is knowing your numbers, right? So if you think about elite athlete, do you think they know their numbers? When they interview Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, they interview let's say Tom Brady, who just won the Super Bowl. Do you think they know their numbers, Joe?
Yeah, frontwards and backwards.
You got to know your numbers. And what do I mean by know your numbers? You got to know how many dials are you making? How many calls are you making in an hour? How many calls are you making a day? How many people did you talk to? How many appointments did you set? If you don't know your numbers, think about it. then you're not being the elite agent that you should be, right? So Joe has the activity tracker right there. We have that available on the website. You can download it. You track your activity, know your numbers. That's a beautiful week right there, 5,900 in AP, but that took them 178 dials, 52 door knocks. If you know your activity and you're tracking it, you're going to stay on point. And let me just say this, when I make my calls, I keep my activity tracker in front of me and make my little tick marks. Don't make the mistake of saying, I'm going to go back and track it when I'm done with the call. Don't do that, because you're not going to, you're going to, what's the word I'm looking for? Delusion yourself of thinking that you made more calls than you actually did. You need to keep track of it as you go along. A couple of
Jimmy,
things I also want to talk about. Yes, sir.
I was going to say, if you look at the screen, here's a sample of how I do my activity. I print out the sheets double sided, and I take it to like Kinko's or someplace and put it in a binder, and it goes with me everywhere. So if I'm making dials, as just as an example, if I'm making dials, this is what it looks like, guys. Saturday morning, early in the morning, do a dial session. As I'm making, every time I make a dial, man, I'm making tick marks in haystacks. When I'm out in the field, for example, door knocks on this particular week, I didn't do any door knocks until Tuesday, and did 11 door knocks that day. But I have the activity tracker in my car, and I'm tracking every little piece of activity that I do. But instead of having a bunch of random sheets of paper, see how you got this spine right here in the middle? I just put together so it's like a notebook, if you will, and just would carry it with me everywhere, man. I just wanted to be able to look back and see exactly what's going on, because like Jimmy says, it's easy to get like caught up in everything that's going on, and it's easy to get like become delusional as far as how much activity that you're making, and you will always, I promise you, you'll always overestimate how much activity you're doing until you actually track it. And then you can look back and say, oh, you know what, man, I only made 100 calls, I only did 5 door knocks for the week. Well, that's, again, lack of prospecting. So let me flip it back over to you, Jimmy.
Thank you, Joe. Um, Now, here's another thing I want to talk about. When you're making calls, that's all you do. Okay. So let's say you're dialing, you actually book an appointment. Don't stop your flow and go to your Google Calendar and type it in. Okay. Don't stop your flow. You do that when your calls are done. Okay. Same thing with the CRM. Like I used Opt. When I'm making my calls, I'll update Opt. But I update it at the end of the call session, not during the call session, because once you start incorporating these other activities, your amount of calls is going to be reduced dramatically. So typically, I would say in a 30-minute block, I could probably make about 25 calls, or let's say 50 in an hour, right? Would you say that's about right for you, Joe?
I run about 35. When I track mine, I'm about 35 dials an hour.
$35 an hour. Okay, so you're probably getting a hold of more people then. But here's the thing is that everybody's going to be different, but you want to track your activity and you want to know. And so, here's one of the best tips I can give you is block out your time, right? Pick some power hours, right? I highly recommend Saturday morning. you know, uh, for me, be honest with you, I'll call till 11 o'clock on Saturday, and I start at 8, so I got a good 3 hours of dialing. If that scares you, start with 30 minutes or start with an hour, and you'll be surprised of how many calls you can make in that time period, right? Then block out some other times during the day throughout the week that you want to do at least a 30-minute or maybe an hour, and that's it. If you block out time and get it done and actually do it, you'll be so surprised at how you're going to start making sales. And guys, the key is that you have to set up time blocks for prospecting daily, not once or twice a week or 3 times a week, every day. Okay. And you need to mix it up. You need to have phone time, you need to have door knock time, right? If you're working social media platform, I don't recommend to do that during the day, during the selling time. Do that late or early in the morning, late at night, early in the morning when you're not going to take away from regular selling. Okay. Um, One last tip, and that is who should you call first, right? If you got a whole bunch of leads, who do you call first, right? So you want to sort through them and you want to put your hottest lead first. That's who you're going to call first. Now, what's your hottest lead? That's going to be your freshest lead. So let's say you had, I don't know, 30 leads from last week. I'm hearing some background noise there, Joe. Let's say you had 30 leads from last week and you didn't get through all of them. You got, let's say 10 left over, and now you got 20 new leads. You want to start with the 20 leads. You want to start with your freshest leads first. If you have referrals, those go first, right? All your hottest, freshest leads you call first. And this is going to give you the highest chance of setting up an appointment, the highest chance of doing a presentation and closing the deal. And then you work the older one later. So picture it like a pyramid. You want to start at the top with the freshest leads and then work down to the widest part of the pyramid, which is going to be your oldest leads last. If you do that, you're going to have a more productive prospecting session. Joe, that's it for me. I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, man, this has been a good call. Just to highlight a couple of things here real quick on the excuses that they make is that we'll just cover these these quick 6 things, and we'll end the call. But the too busy, Jimmy talked about that. Too busy means that you need to get your schedule organized and you need to have those defined blocks of time. If you have, I'll just make some recommendations here. If you're having trouble being organized or putting your schedule together, we have a sample schedule for you to follow. Also, if you want to read a really quick and easy book, Brian Tracy, the sales guru, wrote an organized book. It's called Eat That Frog, and I read it years ago, man, but the things I learned there, I still use today to help me organize my schedule and how to put things in their orders of importance. And remember, prospecting should be is the highest priority activity because prospecting is the highest money making activity, because without prospecting you don't get to make presentations. So that should be one of the first things that you put on your block off on your calendar next to these webinars is putting in times for prospecting. And remember, not ready yet. I'm not perfect. Being perfect is overrated. You just need to do the activity. That's the cure to procrastination, is just pushing through it and doing the activity. This one I think we talked about. Maybe I think we should hit it one more time. It's not a good time to call. Guys, Jimmy, in that book that you read, it's a proven fact that there really is no best time to call, right?
That is correct.
Like maybe one certain time frame is maybe a couple % higher than the other. So
Yes.
any time is a good time. So there's recommended times that we give you, but just because maybe you can't dial in those specific times, man, you gotta get on the phone and you gotta call. I don't care what time it is. If it's between 8 in the morning and 8 o'clock at night, it's a good time to call. Not enough time. You don't necessarily have to block out 4, 5, 6 hours of time. Man, you could do throughout the day, man, you could do, 5 as an example. You could have 5 different 30-minute quick power sessions, man. Do it in short little burst of time, and you can be super effective as long as what makes more important, it's not how much time you set aside to prospect, it's how effectively you prospect. Meaning getting rid of all the distraction. If you're prospecting, that's all you do. You don't look at your phone, you don't look at emails, you don't answer calls. It's next, it's next, it's next. Man, you're pounding through those leads. And I don't know about you, Jimmy, but when it comes to prospecting, I'm old school, man. I like physically having the printed lead in front of me, and versus looking at it at a computer screen, because I got it right there. And dude, I can just flip through those leads. If I book an appointment, I can easily, very quickly on that lead, I can write a quick note, whatever, the time, whatever little notes I need to make, I put it off to the side and I keep going. And I have it as a reference. So when I'm booking my other appointments, I can kind of stack them up to know exactly when those appointments are going to be. And again, we already covered not enough leads. That's a myth. Jimmy talked about, the rule of replacement and always needing fresh leads coming in. But guys, again, you don't need 100 leads to start prospecting. You just need one, and start making calls on it, and prospect that lead until you've exhausted the lead and it's dead. Okay. And then don't have a quiet place to call. We've already talked about that too, man. Get in your car, drive to McDonald's, sit in the parking lot. That way you got a bathroom. If you need to get a drink of water, you can get a drink of water. You can go in and use the bathroom. That's what I used to do, man. Go to McDonald's and sit in the parking lot and make calls for hours, And I would tell my wife, she's like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "I'm going to go prospect." I didn't say I'm going to go sit in my car. So I'm going to go prospect. With that, Jimmy, I think we hit a lot of topics, man. It's almost 11:30, so Central Time. So let's go ahead and sign off and have everybody start their productive weekend.
Awesome. All right. We'll see y'all in Orlando.
All right, man. God bless everybody. Take care. Thanks for being on the call today. Bye-bye.